In this lesson series, we're going to be talking exclusively about the driver, and I'm going to use Adam Scott as a model here because he's been a great driver of the golf ball basically his entire career. And having seen him play, quite a few times in person, I know that his predominant shot is a little bit of a draw throughout his bag, especially with his irons. But he does have the ability to kind of shape his driver both ways, and so he's very very skillful when it comes to the driver, and he's got a lot of things, a lot of moves in his golf swing that I think we can learn from. And so I'm going to be pretty comprehensive in this lesson series. I'm going to first start with talking about my preferences in terms of the setup and some things that I think Adam Scott does well, and then some things that I may change if I was working particularly with the student. So let's look first on at his face-on setup position. So the first thing I want to call to your attention is the fact of how when he sets up to the golf ball, he has both feet sort of beautifully flared out, and that's something that is basically a hallmark of every lesson that I give because I preach rotation in the golf swing so much that I don't have a lot of setup requirements for my students, but this is one of them. So I'm not going to talk about, things you might hear on TV like Adam Scott's balance and posture and finish and all that kind of good stuff, but I am going to talk about the things that I think allows him to move well. He is a very flexible individual, so he's got that sort of a bonus, but he also sets up well in an effort to move well. So you see his feet flared, you see his knee flared, and you also notice that his stance is a little bit wider than shoulder width. So, if you just kind of draw a straight line down there from each shoulder joint, you can see how much wider it is. So obviously the wider the stance is, the more room there is for linear motion or lateral motion in the golf swing. And so I'm talking about in this direction in the backswing and this direction in the follow through. And I'm sort of a big proponent of a very big dynamic change of direction when it comes to the driver because we can create so much more speed and so much force versus just kind of staying stacked up on our left side or just getting stuck on our right side. So I like the fact the feet are flared. I like the fact that he's got a bit wider stance than you would normally see with a driver. And I also like the fact that he's got what I call a little bit of secondary axis tilt. So his spine is tilted gently to the right. And there's obviously two reasons for that. Number one, the fact that the right hand is lower on the grip than the left, and then the fact that the ball position is slightly forward of center in our stance. Now, that would be the one critique that I would have of this specific swing of Adam Scott is his ball position. So for my students, I like to see the golf ball just inside the left heel or just, kind of in line with sort of this left armpit, so to speak. So, I'd like to see his ball position maybe a little bit more forward about where I've got the red line here. But again, I don't know the particular shot he might have been playing at this time. He might have been hitting kind of a low draw, and so that might be why he has the ball position there. But just for you guys at home, I like to see that that ball position a little bit forward. Now, the one thing I do want to caution you with is as you move that ball forward, I want to make sure that you are adding some right lateral side bend. So that would be this right side of your torso flexing a little bit, because what that will do is it will keep your shoulder line very square to your toe line. And I like to see that in a golf swing, especially if you're hitting a little bit of a draw. If you're going to hit a little bit of a fade, I like to see the toe line open to the shoulder line. So I never want to see the shoulders more left than the toe line or more open than the feet line. And so I see a lot of amateurs move the ball forward in their stance in an effort to kind of launch it high, and they get a high right shoulder, they get a high right hand on top of the grip, and their shoulders tend to start kind of pointing very left of the target line. And from there, they're swinging left across it and kind of hitting slices there. So as you move that ball position forward, make sure you add some right tilt in your setup so that you can still be shallow and come from the inside. So the first thing I want to talk about is his takeaway and how he moves into a very, very strong kind of solid right leg. And you can see a lot of pelvis rotation. You can really see sort of a crease right here between his pelvis and that femur where it goes in that socket. He's sort of closing the gap right there. So that would be internal hip rotation. He's really kind of winding that pelvis up into a very, very strong or stable sort of right leg. And a big shoulder turn is a key to making the ball go far. The top of his backswing's about right there, so you can see that he's getting, very well, very easily to parallel at the top, and he's in a very, very strong position. So the first thing you're going to see when he transitions is some lateral motion to his pelvis, and this is a critical ingredient to being able to drive the ball well. So as we see this pelvis move forward, I want you to pay particular attention to one thing. And if I had to give one single piece of advice to driving the ball well, it would be making sure that your head stays behind the golf ball at impact. So if I just draw a straight line down from his left ear to the ball, you're going to notice he's going to move into his right side. He's going to make a big hip turn and a huge shoulder turn over 90 degrees. He's probably got 110, 120 degree shoulder turn there. You're going to see him lead with his lower body in transition. That helps kick in some right side bend or some right lateral bend, and that helps the head stay back behind the ball at impact. So that right side bend is critical because that allows us to be shallow and from the inside, and it also gives us a chance to hit slightly up on our driver. Now, I know Adam is generally levelish to maybe one or so down on his driver, but he's also hitting a bunch of draws at times. But for you guys at home, for our amateurs, we're going to want to tend to hit a little bit more up on it, which is why I'm kind of talking about keeping your head behind it, moving into your right side, leading in transition with the lower body in an effort to kick in some of that right side bend. So if we look at it from down the line, you'll see as the pelvis is rotating, he's not just sliding like we saw in the face-on view. He is rotating the pelvis. He's getting the pelvis forward, and you see the club is nice and shallow back behind the hands into a beautiful delivery position. And you can see the right shoulder is a little bit closer, is obviously closer to the ground than the left shoulder. That's the right side bend, as indicated by the fact that his right arm still has some flex in it. And most of you guys don't have any right side bend on the way down. You have to straighten your right arm really fast to reach the ball, and then that gets the club moving really quickly to the left through the shot, which is why we're hitting pulls and slices. And so your ability to add that right side bend in transition and in the downswing, because we are leading with our hips, gets that sweet spot and that center of mass tracking behind those hands and shallow and from the inside. And then from there we can hit, I believe he's hitting a nice little draw on this shot. But you can draw it or fade it from that delivery position. So again, just to kind of recap, in our setup, let's get the ball a little bit more forward, just inside that left heel. Let's get a nice little bit of axis tilt to that spine where we feel the right shoulder lower than the left. We feel the right hand lower than the left. We feel the right elbow lower than the left. And I'm even okay with you feeling the right hip a little bit lower than the left in your setup. All those things are going to create a condition to where we can come from the inside and we can stay behind it at impact. So again, head, staying behind the ball, moving into a, I don't want to say braced right leg, but a very, very strong right leg. We definitely don't want to get, pressure rolling to the outside of our foot or have this knee rotating too far in this direction, so we start swaying. So we want to stick that foot in the ground. We want to have it flared so that we can have rotation. We want to make a big hip turn, really turn, externally rotate that pelvis into that right leg so we get that big hip turn followed by that huge shoulder turn. When we lead in transition with our pelvis, you're going to see this is one of the first things to move. And it's actually, I get asked this question a lot, it's actually part of the backswing, I would consider that. So as the club is stalling, the pelvis is starting to move first, which gets the hips moving forward. It starts to kick in some right side bend. You'll notice when the right side bend is kicking in, it's when the head stops moving toward that yellow line and it actually starts moving backwards a little bit before impact. That gets us shallow and from the inside, and then from there we're just pushing up out of the ground, extending the pelvis, extending the spine, and we're ready to hit some big high bombs with this driver. So hope this series helps you. Look for more on the